She didn't watch the dead, ancient bone chest cities slide under, or the old canals filled with emptiness and dreams. Past dry rivers and dry lakes they flew, like a shadow of the moon, like a torch burning. One of the most persistent and enduring images in science fiction is that of the long, slow waters of the canals of Mars. Science fiction writers were writing stories about the canal-building civilizations of Mars right up to the 1960s, when NASA launched the Mariner missions and finally flew a spacecraft over Mars, showing everybody once and for all that, guys, there really aren't canals on Mars. But how did we get this idea to begin with? Where did it come from? The story is actually pretty great because it involves a peculiar quirk of early astronomy, a mistranslation, and optometry of all things. In the 19th century, when we really started to be able to observe Mars through telescopes, the telescopes we were looking at it with weren't very great, and the places we were looking at it from weren't very well situated. Astronomers would have to wait hours just to get a decent glimpse of the planet through the Earth's atmosphere. What they didn't realize, though, is how much the Earth's atmosphere was messing with them. Even if it wasn't visible to the naked eye, turbulence in the atmosphere can totally change what we see through a telescope. It can smear the image, and it's even what causes stars to appear to twinkle. Then there's albedo, the idea that certain parts of a planet reflect light to different degrees. On Earth, for example, a desert or the polar ice caps reflect a lot more light than, say, a forest, which can make some areas of a planet look darker than others. And when you take those darker spots and you smear them out, they kinda look like lakes or oases. Then throw in the human tendency to see patterns and relate things to stuff we already understand, and voila! Geological features between darker bits of Mars became a system of canals. But while the idea of Mars canals had existed before, it was really a guy named Giovanni Schiaparelli who inadvertently pushed this to the mainstream. He released detailed maps of Mars, filled with what he thought were perhaps seas. Now, he didn't actually think that there were canals on Mars, but he did think that there were channels running between some of these seas of his. But the Italian word for channel is canali. So guess how 19th century Americans translated that word? And thus, his beautiful maps of the canals of Mars was brought into the mainstream. And you have to remember that this was the great age of canal building here on Earth. The Suez Canal had just been completed, and work on the Panama Canal had recently begun. It was one of the most advanced uses of technology at the time. Canals were a marvel of engineering, so of course an advanced civilization would build canals. Soon, people were writing all about the possibility of an intelligent civilization on Mars. This all caught the attention of one Percival Lowell, an American entrepreneur, adventurer, and writer on the cultures of Japan and Korea, which he had traveled extensively. This idea of canals on Mars fascinated him, and they jibed with his own observations as an amateur astronomer. He decided to dedicate himself to astronomy. Using his own wealth, he built the first observatory ever intentionally placed away from cities at a high elevation, in order to get a better view of worlds beyond our own. He stared for hours through his telescope. For 15 years, he slaved away writing and making detailed observations of what he saw. And he saw canals. Have you ever looked directly into a light for a while and started seeing some squiggly lines? Those squiggly lines you see are actually the veins in your eyeball. And Mars is an awfully bright object, especially when seen through a huge telescope in the dead of night. So, yes, Lowell was in fact seeing the inside of his own eyeball, and drawing his veins in as part of his topographical observations. And since the veins in your eyeballs don't tend to move around very much, they actually were pretty consistent over his years of observation. This led him to declare that Mars is inhabited by beings of some sort or other we may consider as certain as it is uncertain what those beings may be. He would write a number of books on the canals of Mars and the civilization that built them. His conjecture was that they were the last desperate attempt of an advanced civilization to get water from the ice caps of their dying planet, which might be starting to sound a little familiar to you if you've read the opening pages of H.G. Wells's 1898 novel, The War of the Worlds. That exact dying planet scenario is what drives the Martians to invade Earth. It's the impetus for the entire book. We see this idea again in Edgar Rice Burroughs' Barsoom series, which, though largely a fantasy story set in space, chooses when it does reference the scientific thinking of the time to talk about the water scarcity on Mars, its distributions through the canals, and the Martians' attempt to resuscitate their dying atmosphere through technology. And if we jump all the way forward to 1949, where did the kids go to school in Heinlein's book Red Planet? Frickin' Lowell Academy. Shortly after that, we have Bradbury's Martian Chronicles depicting the achingly beautiful decay of the Martian civilization. Still dying, still building canals. Heck, Heinlein even maintains this conception of Mars all the way through Stranger in a Strange Land in 1961, just 3 years prior to Mariner 4's launch. And why all this? Because it's compelling. Because it just makes for better storytelling than Mars being a dusty rock. And perhaps most importantly, because it lets us use Martian civilization as a mirror for ourselves in a way that a vast red desert just cannot do. These authors were smart people, many of them well-read in science. Even early on, Lowell's theories were largely debunked, and many of these writers had to know that. They used bad science for their stories because it was just an intriguing idea. Because here, the science was less important than the questions it raised. Real, true questions conjured out of blurred images and visions from within the eye. It let authors ask about how we would treat a dying race, about what we would do in the same situation. It allowed them to plausibly have us meet people fundamentally different and perhaps wiser than ourselves and ask, would we learn from them or would we destroy them? It allowed them to have humanity try to grapple with, essentially, alien worldviews, and to have their protagonists grapple with radical social or political ideas. It shows sci-fi's willingness to play with scientific concepts, and demonstrates how the questions these theories raise are often more important than the hard nature of the science itself. That said, it also goes to show that we shouldn't always be taking our scientific understanding of the world from science fiction. And it's perhaps the first general theme in which we see a major break from Shelley's dictum about science fiction being the purview of the possible. That bond was of huge utility at the time, and still has immense value for how we think of science fiction now, but breaking it perhaps sets science fiction free. Oh, and before we go, you want to hear a funny story? Lowell later got obsessed with Planet X, this mysterious planet that some people conjectured had to be way far out there in the solar system, because it perturbed the orbits of Uranus and Neptune. And by people, I mean Lowell conjectured that. And it was his observatory that eventually found Pluto. So while you can't win them all, I guess there is some value in having a few wacky scientists doggedly exploring the fringes of science, because every once in a little while, they serve as a check on what we otherwise might have missed. So with that, on to Mars. Join us next time as we explore the canals of the Martian Chronicles.